right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Hannah Jennings, Community Organizer at Tech in Motion, and I'm excited to welcome you all here today. As everyone continues joining, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, maybe one thing you're looking to learn today, and even feel free to drop your LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with others here today. For those of you who have joined Tech in Motion events before, you know we've been bringing together the tech community since 2011, when Motion Recruitment first launched this tech community series. Tech in Motion has always been about learning from industry leaders, making meaningful connections, and being inspired by innovation. Today, we are thrilled to have you back for the second session in our Tech Talent series. So feel free to drop a note in the chat if you joined us last week with Chris and Greg. We would love to see if there are any familiar faces back this time around. If this is your first session in the series, welcome. Our Tech Talent series is designed to dig deeper into the trends and data highlighted in Motion's recently released 2026 Tech Salary Guide, which highlights salary insights for over 100 tech roles and provides expert analysis on the IT landscape. Over the course of the series, we have been and will continue to break down what insights from this year's guide mean for your career, your team, and your hiring strategy in 2026. Today's discussion will run for about 30 minutes, and then we'll follow that by 15 minutes of a breakout room where you can speak face-to-face with our experts. So when it's time for Q&A, you'll see a pop-up on your screen, which is similar to what you're seeing now, giving you the option to turn your camera and microphone on, and then from there, you'll be able to ask your questions to Max and Steven. So be sure to stick around until the very end for that opportunity. Now, let's go ahead and dive into today's discussion. Today's session features Max Gerdes, Executive Director at Motion Recruitment in our Chicago office, and Steven Singer, CIO at Julius Silvert, in a conversation exploring how to bridge the growing gap between skill demand and readiness. So, Max and Steven, I will welcome you to the stage and let you take it away from here.
Hello, hello. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah.
Hey, everyone. I'm Max. I'm our executive director of our Motion Recruitment office out in Chicago. I've been in the IT staffing space for about 11 years now. I work full desk, meaning that I partner up with organizations to help hiring leaders navigate building out their teams and talking about kind of what's happening in the market. On the flip side, obviously connecting with candidates to help them find either their next position or talking about industry trends, salaries, helping them out on their resumes, you name it, kind of that useful guide to help them in their job search as well. So I'm excited to give some perspective from that side of things as we partner with a wide range of organizations ranging from early stage startups to enterprise Fortune 500 companies to help fill a lot of different type of needs. And I've worked in a lot of different markets. So I'm hoping to share some general broad recruiting perspective. And I know Steven will be able to dig into a lot of the technical components as well, which I'm really excited about. So Steven, you want to give a quick intro to yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Singer. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Julius Silvert. I'm also co-chair for Philly CIO here in Philadelphia. Been in technology for 22 plus years, and I'm looking to jump right in and see how we can help this conversation along.
Nice. So I think we want to start it off by thinking about what skills are just kind of most in demand off the bat, and how professionals can recognize their current skill set, thinking about where the market's heading, how they could take their current skill set and open up new doors, especially in industries and maybe even types of roles that they didn't even know they would be interested in off the bat. And so to kick us off, we'll kind of ask an open-ended question that you and I can go back and forth on. But which skills do you see kind of standing the test of time through AI for both technical and non-technical roles?
Yeah, perfect.
What do you think, Steven?
So forgive me, audience. I'm a little under the weather today, so I'm going to try to, talk through everything here. But, I think putting my CIO hat on and keeping that one for a second, systems thinking, anything integration, architecture, data literacy, process optimization, problem solving, proficiency. Those are the areas I think that you're going to need regardless AI or not. I know that's the magic buzzword everybody's trying to sell everybody today, right? And then, the strategic adaptability, what can you do? And that basic business acumen, making sure we have it, relationship management, emotional intelligence. Machines can't replace, business judgment. They just can't. You need those skills.
Yeah, I mean, I think like with tools and languages, like obviously it's like crucial for right now for what companies are trying to build out, but thinking like longer scheme, it's I had on the top of my head a lot of like systems design, architecture, understanding like what is the like the behind the scenes actually physically trying to do, and can we break down like complex problems, right?
Right.
And I think we talked about this earlier, like there's obviously so many different AI tools, right? You and I use different ones, right? But they're ultimately trying to do the same thing. And I think it's not just from an AI perspective, but tools have always been changing. And so it's less about this like specific technology right at the moment, right? And it's like a lot bigger picture stuff, right? Is that how you look at it too?
Yeah, I look at these skills that get you in the door, the things that are the basics. You have to understand, the entry level items from the bottom, right, to get you into the house, to get you into the door, to get you through the hiring process. And then you can, multiply yourself using one of those other tools, but you need the basics of system thinking. You need to understand the way the architecture is meant to be. Data literacy is super, super important, and I think you have to map those skills to some kind of business outcome. You not just
Yeah.
technologies. You got to, lead integrations with, reducing processing time or something that translates elsewhere within the business. You can't just say, "Hey, I can do X and write code just fast," because the AI can do that. These are skills. They're also soft that are necessary. What do we need to make sure that we're going from today's, business objective to the next business objective tomorrow? And how do we get ourselves from there to there?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations we tend to run into, while like again, coding is important, it's almost always like the test of like how do folks approach problems, right? And do they have the core like foundational skill set, right? So if you're leveraging and using an AI, that's totally fine. Most organizations actually want you to, right? Because they're looking to be more efficient and more effective, right, with what they're trying to get. But I think when it's there's a challenge to understand like how did you get to that problem, right? What prompted you even think about? Do you understand what the code's doing based on what the AI is saying? That's where a lot of organizations tend to find in their vetting process, right? So from a candidate perspective side, if you're thinking about okay, getting ready for interviews, it's how do you approach the problem? Can you talk through it? And can you walk through like what went through your mind when you're putting together kind of this prompt, right?
Right. I mean, as a recruiter, you have to have the perspective of what the organization would be looking at, right? So you got to know, looking in, what is that hiring perspective looking for? What am I, the customer in this case, looking at? And how do we make sure that all of those things map to a business outcome that we
Yep.
want, right?
Yep, 1,000%. A lot. So right now, I focus more in product management, design, and kind of the .NET world. And from a product standpoint, almost every organization is looking for business outcomes and the business impact to the user base, to I guess the user base for the application, whether it's an internal facing, what sort of efficiencies did you provide? Was there a reduction of some sort of component, or what's the business outcome? So when you're putting together some of those the resumes, or you're putting together kind of your examples, right? They really want to understand like what did you actually make an impact on, right?
Right.
So I think we both like agree that like obviously like languages and that stuff's obviously still important, right? Like we still need to do the job, but it's throughout the next I don't know, weeks, years, right? There's going to be some foundational skill sets that most people are looking for with the CS fundamentals and understanding kind of why you're using AI the way you are, right?
Right. I mean, how do we anticipate those relevant skills today and then what we're going to need in the future? For sure, I think it comes back to two things. Having a plan from the hiring perspective, from myself internally, what is it that our team needs to do? What do we have to accomplish? Again, I'll go
Yeah.
back to making sure that we're paralleling complexities to not just our competitors, but adjacent industries. And what are we doing to make sure that those outcomes are succeeding in positive business, right? How do we put money to the bottom line where it's lowering cost, or expanding the capex to make sure that we're covering the things that we need to for those business wins? Part of that is making sure that we anticipate that relevant need for what's next in the 3-year plan. And different industries have different regulatory requirements, right? And different customer expectations and cost pressures. Cybersecurity and FinOps and CX design and integration today are all super, super relevant. But so are the things that the stakeholders are looking for. And you have to watch for the table stake things. What's the competitive edge, the skill set at a convergence like AI plus
Mhm.
domain expertise plus change management?
Yep.
Those things become irreplaceable
Yep.
with an AI agent, that you can't just stick in there, that those things are going to allow us to anticipate those needs. So we looked today at how someone is prompting and what tools that they're using, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, Claude, right? We all have our picks and our choices, but how do we answer these questions like you and I are having a discussion, directly with each other without the prompt, without, anything in the background? How do we do that? And we
Yeah.
have to make sure that those skills that are there are super relevant to coming back to those business outcomes.
Yeah. So I think just to recap on that one, like that systems thinking, right? That data analytics, data literacy, right? Those two are going to be really, really big. That business acumen, right? And one of the other things I've worked really closely with on the product side is that cross-functional communication, right? The ability to work with, a lot of different teams, how to, in this craziness of AI too, like everyone's learning, right? So how can we engage with each other about what we are learning, right? And how do we, like help each other, right, amongst the different departments. So I think
Exactly.
that's kind of the skill sets that we're thinking about. And so for anyone that's like, okay, well, I'm in this role. We had this stat on our tech salary guide. It was 70% of tech professionals say their current skill set could be applied to new roles. But like changing roles sounds like so easy, right? Okay, yeah, let's just do that. Well, where do we go, right? And so for you, Stephen, I think, with tech roles and titles, right, they're evolving, right? I've been doing this for 11 years. Engineering and DevOps have continued to combine, right? We're looking for that, right? How should candidates identify like opportunities and roles for maybe like new industries or new types of positions that maybe they like haven't considered before? I think you kind of spoke to it a little bit earlier, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at the different backgrounds that are indicative of those businesses, industries, and genres that they're talking about applying for. If we go back to something really simple and we associate it to plumbing, are you rolling pipe? Are you welding it? Are you sweating it? Are you pressing it today? Is it PEX? Is it copper? Are you using aluminum? Is it old steel pipe? All of those things matter. How do we associate it with technology skills? They all have a basis of understanding of what the skill set is. Do you understand, computer 101? Can you use Outlook and business enterprise applications like Google, and just get in and out of Gmail, create a signature? And then how do you make those titles relevant across industries? Well, each industry has a system admin, a help desk person, the programming facets, are different languages, whether it's Python or JavaScript or whatever it is, PHP. You're going to be laying the foundations in those basic level skills, and then looking at those titles like things that are new. Prompt engineering, it's a
Mhm.
relatively new term. You can go out to most of the colleges today. It doesn't matter if it's Harvard, Yale, whatever. You're going to see these crash courses in AI that are going to be leading you to those next steps. So if we look at the relevant skills you have in the base understanding of your job, you take the AI and those other tools and you 10x yourself, and you own that in the interview process, because you don't know what you don't know. How is that possible? So you have to make sure that you stay super current with the content, and keep LinkedIn and learning up to date, and keep networking.
Yeah, and be versatile, right? And the adaptability component you spoke to. Yeah, roles are definitely becoming more hybrid by default. Product managers with a data background, or engineering with a product sense, or designers doing prototyping and being able to spit out some front end code, right? And you know, titles are crazy. They don't mean a ton in particular. It's more about like, what problems are you solving? One of our clients, actually, it's a really interesting one. They are building this title called a data concierge. It's basically this like combination of a project manager and a data analyst, someone that can really follow the data customer journey, right? But if you saw a role titled data concierge, like, you're like, what is that, right? But it's the combination of a couple different roles, and it's more about what problems our company's trying to solve. So, if I was an individual job seeker, like, I like to ask a lot of questions to candidates, saying like, what problems do you want to solve? Where do you provide impact, or where do you provide the most, impact for organizations, right? Because we can gauge what your background is with where organizations are trying to go, right? And thinking about back to our, what skill sets are going to stand that test of time. There's probably going to be some combinations of what you're doing now with where those skill sets are going.
Yeah, I mean, look at basic networking today. If you were a network engineer before, and you could do IPv4 IP addressing, you understand the basics of how it gets done. But if you ask somebody who has no concept of IPv6 networking today, they're not going to be able to give you a subnet mask that's in hex code. Human beings don't think that way. And most of the new technologies I've seen, specifically networking around VLANs and subnet setups and things like that, that skill set is needed if you understand the base. But when you're getting into broad, corporations or true enterprise and internet public facing, IP addressing, you need to have the understanding of IPv6 at that point. So all relevant skills, all things to understand who we are as IT professionals and what do we need to do to grow, is continuing education. That learning that you hinted at before is very, very relevant in this space. Extremely.
And then I would say joining events like this and, being a part of the community of like, okay, where are things heading, right? So that you're staying ahead of the curve and you're not getting kind of put in kind of the not old school, but the role that you're doing where we know it's going to continue to evolve. Can you stay ahead, right? And you've done a lot of hiring in your day, right? And so again, a lot of these questions aren't necessarily just because of AI, but that's the world we're in. It's around like the technologies and where we're going. But for you, when you're evaluating candidates like potential to grow beyond their current skill set, right? Are there areas that you feel like you gauge more, or what do you want to hear out of people, right? To kind of get that feeling.
Personally, I like the discomfort tolerance, asking the questions that really they can't answer on the spot, to hear how do they problem solve and what do they do in the situations that are unknown, right? For the audience that sits back and thinks that, there's an entire list of preparation questions for this conversation, there isn't, right? There's some generalized topics and then you and I discuss. And as we know, that is a discomfort tolerance. We have to know what you're going to do when you're sitting in the hot seat. When we volunteer for things like this, it's just like interviewing. We have to know, what's the last time somebody acquired a new skill and how fast do they move on it? What is the intellectual curiosity of that applicant? What's it look like for their, learning velocity? How do they pick up skills and action them in the business? What's the outcome? Can they articulate when something is wrong and where it went wrong?
Yeah.
What is, the evidence of horizontal leadership? What's it look like when you have to say, hey, we're talking about technology problem, let's compartmentalize it to system outage and how do we communicate with the customer? All these things that matter. I would say problem focused or solution focused, and they're going to have to pick that track and then run with the rest of their answers. That's what I'm looking at and how I'm evaluating staff today, especially with the way people are just, we've seen every social media reel that there is of putting your resume in and spitting it back out for the perfect fit for the job. Yeah, you want to do that, but you have to be able to talk through now what you put on the resume.
That brings us to like what we were thinking next, which is perfect because as a recruiter too, obviously we see a lot of resumes. Every resume is starting to look perfect. So if I was a job seeker, I'd be like, how do I stand out, right? How do I highlight what I'm, how do I showcase those skill sets? How do I validate those skills, or like what I do? How do I position myself to kind of like make that next move? So like, I mean, I can answer some of it too, but like if you're thinking about screening for like genuine, up to date, like I don't know, buzzwords or experience, like what do you want to hear as a hiring manager? What can folks in this call, think about making sure they're doing on resumes and even during interviews? And then vice versa, we can also add like as a leader, right? Like what would you make sure you're doing a better job of?
The skills on the resume, I think, between the ability to validate those skills and answer the questions that the hiring manager is going to be able to ask you about it. If you say you understand prompt engineering, what does that mean? Tell me exactly what tool set, where are you prompt engineering at? What, AI are you using, keeping it super relevant to the AI conversation. What are they going to do when the AI responds? Ask them to critique, what it says, and give us something they have to scenario-based technical, screening. I think that will really help drastically change the value of the resume versus the inflation of the resume and how to validate those skills. Metrics and baselines, budgets, ROI, their actual LinkedIn engagement will tell us some of those things, and the network of reputation somebody has. Does somebody know them from something else? Have they been on another event, or spoke publicly, or even privately in smaller sessions? And really diving into those references and asking some questions. Hopefully that gives us some answers to weed through. From a skill perspective, with resumes looking perfect, I'm looking for the imperfect resume, the one that doesn't have the M dash that ChatGPT adds, the one that provides the punctuation missing, not on purpose, but in a random scenario, the thing that looks human. Because at the end of the day, I'm hiring a person. I don't want a robot. I want someone that emotional intelligence, and someone who's going to become irreplaceable in our organization at some point, at some level, that isn't an AI tool.
Yeah. A survey by Checker said that 59% of managers say they've suspected a candidate of using AI to misrepresent themselves during the hiring process. And, off of that, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like on purpose, right? I think it's like, well, hey, help me tailor my resume towards this job description, right? But that LLM doesn't know you totally, right? Like it doesn't know if you don't actually have some experience. And so it might inflate a buzzword that manager is specifically looking for, and you're going to get asked about it, right? And I think for me, if I'm talking to folks, I'm digging into, where did you use it, right? What did you do with it, right? How much ownership did you have? What worked, what didn't, right? And being able to explain those full processes are going to be what really help, showcase that, okay, this person really does have that skill set. And so from a candidate perspective, I would make sure to be ready to talk through those case studies, right? Those examples, right? And talk about what didn't work, to be honest, what failed, right? Because people that are experimenting with AI, like it's not perfect. It won't be for a while, right? And I think organizations are looking for folks that want to, be creative and find new solutions, and even talk about what didn't work, because at least you're out there putting yourself, in position to try to make it work.
Right, for sure. And from the leadership perspective, I would ask the question, how do you know, Max? How are you sending us the candidates that you guys send us? How do we know that they're validated and they're just passing a test that you can copy and paste right into, an AI?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at resumes and we're looking at, okay, well, we have the skill set section, right? Usually on top. And okay, they say, we have a lot of, the buzzwords, right? Almost everyone has the buzzwords at this point. And so you want to be able to see it in their experience somewhere, right? Do they talk about it in one of the bullet points? What do they use it for? Maybe what was the business outcome? I know you mentioned kind of the business acumen and ROI components aren't necessarily super important, but at least they're tracking it towards some sort of metric. And can they speak on that? Because we're looking for that end-to-end ownership of some sort of decision on that technology potentially, right? Sometimes you're a little bit in a box of what is possible, right? Of what your current organization uses. So if you are using it on the side, that's totally okay, right? And maybe even having a side project, part of your resume, because that's what actually stands out for me for the people that, are going to grow beyond their skill set. They're tinkering with the latest and greatest, and it may not, again, be in their professional experience, but they're able to talk about something that they've done on a side project, or they've been a part of a few meetups that have done it, right? And they're learning it more. And I'd rather people obviously be honest with that and say, hey, here's my skill set with where I'm at on it, but here's what I've seen so far. Here's what I like. Here's what doesn't work. And if you can know the limitations and, the possibilities of some of it, it helps stand out, right?
Right. I mean, and I would encourage the people in the chat too that are answering these questions. I know the poll just went up. Have you used AI to, inflate your resume? I have. I mean, I'm assuming if I have used it, somebody else has. I'm not saying I'm not going to use it, right? But you have to check it. You have to make sure the prompt is right and that you can answer those questions. The AI tool, the AI readiness, that entire check of what it's going to do versus your resume versus the job description, it's going to really make it formal. We don't all write and speak in, the Harvard or the Yale, it's just not, everything's not by the book, right? You need to find that humanality comment in the resume. You need to stand out. You need to be a person that can stand on the underlying baseline of what the skill set is that you're saying you have. Right? It's that age-old question of skill, time, college, education, experience, and mixing it all together. You have to be able to stand on those skills for sure. What's your next question, Max?
I got it ready, but we've got 5 minutes left, so I wanted to jump into, well, hey, maybe I haven't had the opportunity, right, to work on AI, because it's a very small portion of companies that are actually investing in AI right now. I think a lot of organizations and managers we talk with are like, we'd love to figure it out, but we don't have the right use case yet, and we're not doing it, or we don't have the full buy-in or budget. And so with so many few companies offering formal AI training, like, how should leaders kind of ensure employees still build the skills to stay competitive? Because that's the number one reason we see folks move. Well, I mean, stability is a big thing, but growth, right? And if you feel like you're getting left behind from a technical standpoint, we want to retain teams, right? So Stephen, thinking about for you, like, how should leaders set that up to help give training?
All right. So from a leader perspective, I think development of staff is a shared responsibility. We have to provide time and resources that allows the employees to come together and to bring that effort, right? And we have to give some level of training hours, or some type of coachable scenarios, at least, right? Where we can make the influence to suggest someone who goes and gets that new fancy certification or that vendor specific tooling that supports the ecosystem that prioritizes the business. And that will help certify the person in what they have. And then without any formal training, right, we have to have and see self-directed learning, at times, structured projects where there's learning opportunities. And, we all work with different vendors. Leverage those vendors and their resources, whether it's, white papers or e-learning, public databases like YouTube. And, I'm a big fan of peer-built learning, where, you get in a summit with each other, sit around a table and have somebody show it, and then you guys can action some things together. It doesn't necessarily have to be about new code or new prompts or new engineering. It doesn't all have to be technical based. But in an environment that really helps upskill people without any formal structure is one where some CEO or some business leader thought through it and made it cohesive for the learning environment.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to even the original couple of points of the adaptability, the creativity, the flexibility, part of it is figuring out ways to help your business a little bit, right? And how do I incorporate it? And that's only going to better you as an individual, just so everyone knows. It's obviously for the shareholders and the business, all these things, but it's how can you go find some opportunities, I think, internally, right? But then I think on the flip side, obviously from a leader standpoint, it's how can we set this up so folks are feeling that we are investing in them and giving them opportunities too. So with a minute or two left before we think about kind of breaking off and getting into QA, like any final advice on just for job seekers, on leaders, on staying competitive in the market here, outside of everything we just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to build the literacy from the ground up in the business values and get comfortable with the data, specialize in the applications that solve the business's problems. We have to hire for learning and agility, just like we talked about, and create experimental space, invest in that development of human capital resources, right? Build a narrative that the business impact is going to be truly, truly positive. Network strategically with those people. Come to more events in person. I mean, there's not enough to say that shaking hands with somebody and building that that T-shaped design after the people that you have for your different projects and having some depth along with the width, it's not going to hurt at all.
Yeah.
And
I had the meetups piece on my end too.
Yeah.
I think these are awesome. We're really excited to be able to do these a lot more. We have in-person ones, but there's a lot more than just obviously Tech in Motion. And there's a lot of technical ones where you can kind of get ahead of, well, what is happening in my industry, right? What are people talking about, right? And what are they seeing in their own companies? I also was thinking about we in the job seeker side, we're doing a lot of interviews and start to track trends, right? What are organizations asking in their interview steps, right? What's important for them? And we actually have a candidate right now that is reading a book on systems design and architecture, because I don't think he comes from like a formal, like very, very good engineer, right? But a lot of the questions he's getting is systems design, right? So he's like, well, let me actually do some research. And, that little, outside of, that additional help, right, is just going to put him in a position to do better as well. So it's just like tracking the trends of what organizations are asking, where are they heading, right, and starting to see that for yourself too. And then I think that flexibility and knowing that titles are going to be ambiguous, over the next couple of years too, and thinking about what skill sets do you have, what value do you provide and bring, and what problems do you enjoy solving, right? Because there's going to be a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of new teams getting built out. There's a lot of new automation efforts. There's a lot happening right now, and there's new areas that are hitting really good growth modes. So you want to figure out that path that makes sense for you, and talk to a recruiter, talk to another engineering leader, going to meetups, like help understand kind of where that's heading.
Right, and that cross-functional training,
totally,
really, really understanding that you can't be good at prompt engineering if you don't have any understanding of ML fundamentals. To implement all these new AI features, you have to be aware of the risks and the regulatory pieces from your industry. You really have to make sure that all the non-technical stuff you're doing the smart consumption of. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, kind of thing today, right? And making sure that we value each other's experiences, so that when we're learning from our peers and our industry experts, and we're sitting in these conversations and attending these types of sessions, we're listening at that content and going out and cross-training ourselves for what's next. Whether you're a software developer and you don't know anything about the key networking pieces, or you're the CEO and have no idea what cybersecurity is, from the bottom to the top, you're going to need to understand everything in between, and at least have the wherewithal to know what you don't understand yet, and that you're going to learn or put some time into.
Yeah. Cool.
Let's look at Hannah. What do you have from the audience here?
All right. Thank you, Stephen and Max. That was a great conversation, and our audience was clearly very engaged in the chat. So thank you for all of your wonderful questions. If you enjoyed this format and the discussion today, be sure to join us next Thursday for the final session in the series, where we'll talk about the future of teams, including what evolving work models look like, hybrid expectations, and the build versus buy debate. We are now